I watched the color drain from Rebecca's face as the video played. There she was laughing in David's arms. My best friend for over 2 decades. The room filled with friends and family was dead silent. 15 years of marriage shattered in minutes. But I wasn't angry anymore. No anger had left me months ago. What stood there holding a glass of champagne and a stack of divorce papers was a man who had planned every second of this moment. You see, betrayal doesn't always hit you like a storm. Sometimes it creeps in quietly through late nights at the office, unanswered texts and forced smiles at dinner. For 3 years, my wife and my best friend lived a double life behind my back. And for 6 months, I prepared for this exact night. If you discovered your spouse was cheating with your closest friend, would you explode in rage? Or would you wait for the perfect moment to expose them both? Stay with me because this isn't just a story about heartbreak. It's about how I turned the ultimate betrayal into a lesson they'd never forget. I used to believe that hard work and loyalty were enough to build a lasting marriage. For 15 years, I dedicated myself to providing Rebecca with the life we always dreamed of. A cozy home in suburban Chicago weekend, getaways, dinners at her favorite restaurants. It wasn't perfect, but I thought we were happy. I'm Michael Thompson, a software engineer who climbed the ladder, the old-fashioned way. Long hours, missed holidays, and countless nights staring at lines of code while Rebecca slept alone. I told myself it was all for us, for our future. And through it all, my best friend David was always around. We met in college. He was the best man at my wedding, my go-to for every barbecue game night and fishing trip. Rebecca and David got along well, too well in hindsight, but back then I thought nothing of it. Why would I? These were the two people I trusted most in the world. Looking back, I can't believe how blind I was. There were signs, of course there were. The subtle glances they thought I didn't catch. The inside jokes I wasn't part of. The sudden excuses, Rebecca staying out late with friends, David canceling our plans last minute. But when you trust someone, your mind does this thing. It fills in the gaps with comforting lies. She's just stressed. David's probably busy with work. I convinced myself that every doubt was just paranoia, fueled by exhaustion. Then came the first anonymous text. A blurry photo of Rebecca and David sitting too close at a cafe I'd never heard of. No message, just the image. I laughed it off, showing it to Rebecca. She glanced at it, shrugged, and called it ridiculous. David joked about having a secret affair when I brought it up, and we all laughed, but the text didn't stop. More photos, then screenshots of messages, intimate, unmistakable. I wanted to believe it was some cruel prank. I even considered changing my number, pretending none of it was real. But deep down I knew. The late nights, the sudden distance between us. The way Rebecca barely touched me anymore. I spent weeks in denial, burying myself in work, trying to ignore the growing pit in my stomach. Every time I looked at Rebecca, I wondered if I was imagining things, or if I was sleeping next to a stranger. It wasn't until I found a hotel receipt in her purse, a place nowhere near her office, that reality finally broke through my defenses. That's when I knew I couldn't just hope this would go away. I needed answers. I needed proof. And most importantly, I needed a plan. The day I hired a private investigator was the day I stopped lying to myself. I wasn't just a husband in the dark anymore. I was a man preparing for war. I remember sitting in my car outside the PI's office, hands gripping the steering wheel, heart pounding like I was about to confess a crime. But I wasn't the criminal here. I was the fool who had let two people make a mockery of his life. The investigator, a calm, no-nonsense woman named Karen, didn't flinch when I told her what I suspected. She'd seen it all before I handed over the anonymous texts, the hotel receipt, and a list of Rebecca's girls' nights and David's sudden disappearances. "Give me 2 weeks," she said. It only took one. By the end of the first week, Karen sent me a folder, photos, videos, timestamps. Rebecca and David weren't even trying to hide it. Dinner dates, holding hands in public, entering hotels together. They were bold too, confident that I was too blind, too trusting to ever notice. I stared at those images for hours, feeling everything and nothing all at once. There was rage, sure, but more than that, there was a cold realization. My marriage had been over for years. I just hadn't been informed. But Karen didn't stop there. When I mentioned the odd withdrawals from our joint account, she suggested digging deeper. That's when we uncovered the second betrayal. Rebecca had been siphoning money for months, funneling it into a hidden account. An account with both her and David's names on it. It wasn't just an affair of the heart, it was theft. They weren't planning a fling. They were planning a future funded by me. I could have confronted them right then. I could have stormed into our house, thrown the evidence on the table, and demanded answers. But what would that have done? Given them a chance to spin lies to hide assets? To turn the narrative against me? No, if they wanted to play dirty, I'd play smarter. I contacted a divorce attorney, one who specialized in high asset protection and infidelity cases. We spent weeks quietly moving my personal funds into secured accounts, freezing joint credit cards, and documenting every financial misstep Rebecca made. At home, I became an actor in my own life. I kissed Rebecca goodnight. I shared dinners with David when he dropped by, pretending to laugh at his jokes. Every smile was a mask, every conversation was a calculation. The hardest part wasn't pretending I didn't know. It was realizing how easy it was for them to lie to my face day after day. But I wasn't just waiting, I was building something. When our 15th anniversary approached, Rebecca suggested a small dinner at home. That's when inspiration struck. Why not give them the stage they deserved? I rented out a private dining hall, invited close friends, family. Even David and his wife Rebecca was thrilled, thinking I was rekindling romance. David smirked like he'd gotten away with everything. They had no idea that every detail, from the seating arrangement to the hidden projector, was designed for one purpose: to end their charade in front of everyone who mattered. There's a strange kind of loneliness that comes when you know the truth but have to pretend you don't. Every morning I'd wake up next to Rebecca, knowing exactly where she'd been the night before. Every time David texted me with a casual, "Hey man, let's catch the game this weekend," I'd stare at the screen, wondering how easily betrayal rolled off his fingers. The house felt colder, quieter. Not because anything had changed on the surface, but because I had. I stopped seeing Rebecca as my wife. She became a stranger wearing the face of the woman I once loved. David wasn't my best friend anymore. He was just a man counting down the days until he could take what he thought was his. The worst part, they thought they were winning. Rebecca would kiss me goodbye before her yoga class, probably heading straight into David's arms. David would pat me on the back at barbecues, laughing with the same mouth that whispered lies to my wife. I realized then there was no saving this. No confrontation, no apology, no tearful confession could undo 3 years of deceit. Our marriage wasn't broken, it was obliterated. That was the moment I crossed the point of no return. It wasn't a single event. It was a slow, suffocating realization that the life I thought I had was nothing more than a carefully constructed illusion. I remember standing in our living room one night, watching Rebecca scroll through her phone, smiling at whatever message David had just sent. She didn't even bother hiding it anymore. And why would she? In her mind, I was still the clueless husband too, busy with work to notice. I walked upstairs, closed the door to my office, and stared at the folder Karen had given me. Photos, videos, bank statements. It wasn't just evidence. It was the remains of my marriage, neatly cataloged and timestamped. That night I called my attorney and told him, "I'm ready." From that point on, everything became about precision. Every document signed, every asset protected, every detail of that anniversary dinner planned down to the second. Rebecca was excited. She thought I was making up for all the late nights and missed dates. She didn't see the calculation behind my smile. David, arrogant as ever, joked about how romantic I was becoming. I wasn't romantic, I was resolute. There was no going back, no second chances. I knew that exposing them would burn every bridge, that once I played that video life, as we all knew, it would be over. But oddly enough, I felt calm, because when someone shows you who they truly are, the hardest part isn't letting go. It's accepting that they were never who you thought they were to begin with. As the anniversary approached, I looked at Rebecca differently. Not with love, not even with hate. Just clarity, and clarity, I realized, is the most dangerous weapon of all. The beauty of a perfect plan is that no one sees it coming, especially the ones who think they've outsmarted you. Once I accepted that my marriage was nothing more than a contract waiting to be dissolved, I shifted my focus. Not on revenge driven by anger, but on justice delivered with precision. The first step was financial. I worked closely with my attorney to quietly transfer my personal savings and investments into protected accounts, anything with both our names on it. Frozen, I opened new credit lines under my name alone and redirected my paycheck to a separate bank. Rebecca didn't notice a thing. She was too busy planning secret getaways with David. Next came the evidence. Karen, my PI, compiled everything into a neat, indisputable package: photos, videos, text logs, even the details of the hidden joint account Rebecca shared with David. We made sure every piece was time-stamped, verified, and ready for court. But I didn't just want a legal victory. I wanted the truth laid bare in front of everyone who mattered to them. That's when the idea of the anniversary party became more than just a celebration. It became the stage. I booked a private dining room at an upscale restaurant, classy enough to make Rebecca feel special, but discreet enough to control the environment. I invited close friends, family, Rebecca's parents, and of course, David and his wife, Emily. Rebecca was thrilled. She thought I was rekindling the romance, making up for years of neglect. She spent days shopping for the perfect dress, talking about how this was the fresh start we needed. David played his part too, grinning, like the snake. He was probably thinking about how they'd soon be free to live off the money they'd stolen from me. Behind the scenes, I coordinated with the restaurant's tech team. I provided them with a USB drive containing a carefully edited video, a 5-minute compilation of Rebecca and David's escapades set to play right after my toast. On the day of the event, I was calm, almost unnervingly so. Rebecca looked radiant, completely unaware that she was walking into the end of her carefully spun web of lies. David arrived with Emily on his arm, the picture of a devoted husband. If only she knew dinner was perfect. Laughter filled the room. Rebecca clung to my arm, beaming as everyone toasted to 15 wonderful years. David raised his glass, locking eyes with Rebecca more than once. Those subtle glances they thought no one noticed. When dessert was served, I stood up, glass in hand. I tapped it gently, drawing everyone's attention. I just want to say a few words. I began, my voice steady. I spoke about love, trust, and the importance of honesty in a marriage. I watched Rebecca's smile falter, just a flicker, but she quickly recovered. David shifted in his seat, sensing something was off. Then I nodded to the staff. The lights dimmed, the projector screen lowered. At first there was confusion, then silence. The video began: Rebecca and David entering hotels, sharing intimate moments, laughing in each other's arms. Clips of their text messages flashed across the screen, discussing how much longer they needed to drain Michael dry before running off together. I didn't say a word. I just watched. Rebecca's face went pale. David's jaw clenched, his eyes darting around the room. Emily gasped, her hand flying to her mouth before she slowly removed her wedding ring and placed it on the table. When the video ended, I reached into my jacket and pulled out a folder. Rebecca, I said calmly, these are your divorce papers. Everything you tried to steal has been secured. You and David won't see a cent more. The room was frozen, friends and family, staring, some in shock, others in disgust. Rebecca tried to speak, but no words came out. David stood abruptly, but Emily was faster. She threw the ring at him and walked out without a glance back. Rebecca's parents, they couldn't even look at her. I placed the folder in front of Rebecca, took a final sip of champagne and walked away, leaving the mess exactly where it belonged. As I walked out of that dining hall, I didn't feel triumphant. There was no rush of victory, just a deep, quiet sense of closure. Behind me, the silence was louder than any shouting match could have been. Rebecca sat frozen, staring at the divorce papers like they were written in a language she couldn't understand. David, well, last I saw, he was chasing after Emily, who had made it clear she wanted nothing more to do with him. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. By the next morning, the fallout had already begun. Rebecca showed up at our house, or rather what used to be our house, banging on the door, demanding to talk. I didn't answer. I'd already had the locks changed. Instead, I watched from the window as she paced the porch, tears streaming down her face, phone in hand. As she tried calling me over and over, I didn't pick up. What was there left to say? Within days, word spread through our social circle. Friends who once admired Rebecca now avoided her like a plague. Her parents, who had invested so much into our marriage, even helping with the down payment on the house, were devastated. Her mother called me, voice trembling, apologizing for what Rebecca had done. I told her she had nothing to apologize for. This was Rebecca's doing alone. David didn't fare any better. Emily filed for divorce immediately, and from what I heard, she made sure he walked away with nothing. David tried reaching out a pathetic email filled with excuses and half-hearted apologies. I deleted it without reading past the first line. Rebecca's secret account frozen thanks to the financial fraud she'd committed by siphoning money from our joint funds. My lawyer made sure the court saw every transaction. She wasn't walking away with a penny, more than what was legally unavoidable, and even that was minimal. The life they planned together collapsed before it even began. Weeks passed and Rebecca's desperation grew. She sent letters, emails, even tried ambushing me at my office. Gone was the confident woman who thought she could outsmart me. All that remained was someone drowning in the consequences of her own choices. I heard, through mutual friends, that David couldn't find steady work, his reputation in ruins, after Emily made sure everyone knew exactly what kind of man he was. Apparently, living off my money had been his retirement plan. Without it, he was nothing. There was one moment, though, that stayed with me. About a month after the party, I ran into Rebecca's father at a grocery store. He looked older, like the weight of his daughter's betrayal had aged him overnight. He approached me, shook my hand firmly, and said, "You didn't deserve any of this, Michael. I raised her better than that." I nodded, unsure of what to say. There was no satisfaction in hearing it, just a somber understanding that sometimes even the people we think we know best can become strangers. In the months that followed, I focused on rebuilding not just my finances, but my sense of self. I sold the house. It was never really a home after everything. I moved into a downtown apartment, smaller but mine, every inch free of lies. Friends I thought I'd lose stood by me. Some even admitted they'd noticed things, but didn't know how to tell me. It didn't matter anymore. The truth was out and I was free. Rebecca and David. Last I heard, they weren't speaking anymore. Funny how quickly alliances crumble when there's no one left to betray. I never responded to Rebecca's final email, the one where she begged for closure and claimed she still loved me. Closure wasn't something she could give me. I found it the moment I chose to take control of my own story, not as a victim, but as the one who ended the cycle of deceit on my terms. It's strange how life feels after the storm passes. You expect to feel broken, like the pieces will never fit back together. But standing in the quiet of my new apartment, I realized something. I wasn't broken, I was free. For 15 years, I measured my worth by how much I could provide, how hard I could work to keep everyone happy. I thought loyalty and sacrifice were enough to guarantee trust. But betrayal taught me a lesson I never saw coming. That trust isn't just something you give blindly, it's something you protect, just like your heart and your future. In the months after the divorce, I found myself reflecting not on Rebecca and David, but on me. How did I let it get that far? How did I ignore the signs, silence my instincts, and allow two people to rewrite my life without my consent? The answer was simple, because I believed that love meant never doubting those closest to you. But real love, whether for a partner, a friend, or yourself, comes with boundaries. It comes with awareness. I didn't let this experience turn me bitter. Instead, I used it as fuel. I joined a local support group for people blindsided by infidelity. Listening to their stories, I realized I wasn't alone, and neither were they. Eventually, I started mentoring others, helping them navigate not just the emotional wreckage, but the practical steps to protect themselves. Because if there's one thing I learned, it's this: betrayal doesn't define you, how you respond to it does. I could have lashed out. I could have let anger consume me, made reckless choices in the heat of the moment. But staying calm, thinking ahead, that's what gave me control. That's what left Rebecca and David facing the consequences while I walked away with my dignity intact. So if you ever find yourself staring down the barrel of betrayal, remember, you don't have to fight fire with fire. Sometimes the most powerful move is patience, preparation, and letting the truth do the talking. I didn't just survive what they did to me, I turned it into the foundation for a life where I know my worth, and I'll never let anyone take that from me again.